5 years ago, my boss told me I'd never have what it takes to lead. 2 weeks ago, I signed the papers that made me the new owner of his entire company, and he didn't even recognize me until I sat down across from his own desk. My name is Delia. I'm 34 now, but I was 29 the day my boss, Preston Hartwell, looked me dead in the eye across that glass desk and said I would never be leadership material, 2 weeks before he laid me off in a round of cuts that somehow only included me. I sat there in a blazer I'd bought specifically for that promotion interview, holding a folder of numbers I'd spent 3 weekends preparing, and I didn't say a single word. I just nodded, thanked him for his time, and walked out of that building for what I thought was the last time in my life. I had spent 6 years at Hartwell Logistics working my way up from an entry-level coordinator to running an entire regional operations team. I trained half the managers who eventually outranked me. I fixed a supply chain failure at 2 in the morning that saved the company a client worth almost $1 million a year, and nobody outside my department ever heard about it, because my boss made sure his name was the one attached to every win that came out of my team. Preston was the founder's son. He inherited the company the way some people inherit a house they never had to build, and he had a talent for taking credit that felt almost effortless, like he'd been practicing it his whole life. I used to tell myself it didn't matter, that the work would eventually speak for itself. I believed that for 6 years. I believed it right up until the day I sat across from him, pitching for the regional director role I had essentially already been doing unofficially for over a year, and he leaned back in his chair like the question personally amused him. "You're incredibly hardworking, Delia," he said, genuinely, "one of the best I've got. But leadership isn't really about grinding it out. It's vision. It's knowing how to think bigger than the day-to-day. I just don't see that in you." He gave the role to a man named Corey who had been at the company for 14 months and whose biggest accomplishment, as far as I could tell, was golfing well with clients. 2 weeks later, I was called into HR alongside 3 warehouse employees during what they called a restructuring. I was the only person from my department on that list. I remember sitting in my car in the parking lot afterward, not crying, just staring at the steering wheel, replaying 6 years of 12-hour days and canceled weekends, and thinking about how easily a person can build something with their bare hands and still be told they don't have the vision to lead it. I didn't post anything online. I didn't send an angry email. I went home, and for exactly one night, I let myself feel every bit of it. Then the next morning, I made a decision I never told a single person at Hartwell about. I was done being the person who did the work while someone else got the title for it. I was going to build something entirely, completely mine, where nobody could ever again tell me I lacked the vision to lead it. I had almost no savings because 6 years of being underpaid relative to what I actually did doesn't leave much room for a cushion. I took a part-time consulting job just to keep the lights on, and I spent every other waking hour building a logistics optimization firm from a card table in my apartment, the same exact skill set Hartwell had built an entire company around. Except this time it belonged to me. I taught myself contract law from library books because I couldn't afford a lawyer for the first year. I cold emailed 40 companies before I got a single client to say yes, a small regional distributor who needed their delivery routes restructured and couldn't afford a big firm's rates. I did that job for almost nothing because I needed the case study more than I needed the money. For 2 years, I worked harder than I ever had at Hartwell, but it felt completely different because every late night belonged to something with my own name attached to it. I remember the first time a client called me, the expert, in a meeting, not the coordinator, not the assistant to, just the expert. And I had to excuse myself to the bathroom afterward because I hadn't realized how much I'd been waiting 6 years to hear something like that. By year 3, my firm had grown to 11 employees. We specialized in exactly the kind of mid-sized logistics restructuring that companies like Hartwell always underpriced and overpromised on, because I knew precisely where their weaknesses were. I'd lived inside them for 6 years. By year 4, we'd landed 2 contracts with companies that used to be Hartwell's direct competitors, and I started hearing secondhand that Hartwell Logistics wasn't doing well. Preston had personally overruled his own operations director and pushed a warehouse expansion into a market Hartwell had no real presence in, convinced that vision alone would carry it. It didn't. The company had taken on debt it couldn't comfortably service, the exact kind of mistake anyone who understood the day-to-day operations, and not just the vision, would have caught immediately. I won't pretend I didn't think about it more than once. I won't pretend some small part of me didn't want exactly this to happen. Then, 5 months ago, I got a call from an acquisitions broker I'd worked with before on a completely unrelated deal. He said a mid-sized logistics company was quietly looking for a buyer, that ownership wanted a fast, discreet sale before their financial situation became public knowledge, and that my firm's operational expertise made me one of the only realistic buyers who could actually turn the business around instead of just stripping it for parts. He sent over the preliminary documents that same afternoon. I didn't recognize the holding company name at first. Then I saw the address. I sat at my desk for a long time after that, looking at the building address I used to park outside of at 7 in the morning for 6 straight years. I didn't rush into it emotionally. I brought in my own operations team to do a full audit before I agreed to anything, because I needed to know this made sense as a business decision first, revenge second, if it was going to happen at all. The numbers were worse than the rumors. The deal closed quietly, through my holding company, with my name on paperwork Preston likely never bothered to read closely, because by then he was desperate enough to take the first serious offer that came through his broker. I decided to walk into that building myself for the final signing, instead of sending a lawyer the way my team recommended. I told them I needed one thing before we finalized it, and it wasn't in the contract. Preston looked mostly the same, a little grayer, a little more tired around the eyes, sitting behind the same glass desk in the same office where he once told me I'd never be leadership material. He didn't recognize me at first, not until I sat down across from him and set my folder on his desk the same way I had 5 years earlier, except this time it wasn't a pitch for a promotion. "Delia," he said slowly, the color draining from his face as it clicked into place. This is your holding company?" "It is," I said, and I let that sit exactly as long as it needed to. He tried to recover the way people like him always do, reaching for the tone that used to work on me. "Well, this is actually great news. You know this business inside and out. We could bring you on to run operations again, officially this time, real title, real equity. You'd basically be running the place either way." "I already own the place, Preston," I said. "You're not offering me a job. You're asking me for one." He didn't have a response for that, not a real one, so he tried a different angle, the same tired one people always reach for last. "Come on, Delia, we go back 6 years. You know I always respected your work. You respected my work enough to build your entire company's uptime on it," I said. "You just never respected me enough to believe I could lead it. So I built somewhere I could." I opened the folder and slid the final documents across the desk, the ones that kept the company's employees, the good ones, the ones who'd actually done the work alongside me, fully intact under new ownership, and the ones that removed him from any operational role entirely, effective the day the sale closed. He read through it in silence, his jaw tightening with every page, and when he finally looked up, there was nothing left of the man who once leaned back in his chair like my future was his to casually decide. "You planned this," he said quietly. "This whole thing." "No," I said, standing up and buttoning my blazer, the same one from that promotion interview, 5 years old now and finally worn for the right reason. "I just built something real while you assumed I never could. What you do with that information is up to you." I walked out of that office for the second time in my life, except this time I wasn't holding a folder full of numbers nobody wanted to look at. I was holding the keys. So here's what I still think about some nights. If someone ever told you flat out that you didn't have what it takes and part of you almost believed them, what would you have built to prove them wrong? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story hit something real in you, hit subscribe, because this isn't the last time someone gets underestimated on this channel.